Okay, maybe we'll get started.
Yep.
Okay. Right, I'll get going. Well, welcome everybody. So I'll introduce myself for a start. I'm Kieran Walsh of the Department of Statistics of the International Labour Organization. I am part of the task force, which is and has been working on the topic of coordination of household surveys in recent years. I'm hoping we'll have a really interesting session today talking about coordination of household surveys in different settings. But when we started working on this topic a couple of years ago now, it's fair to say, we had a very broad area of interest. The title, Coordination of Household Surveys, it covers potentially so much. But the reason we selected that topic for a task force of the Intersecretariat Working Group on Household Surveys was because improved coordination in the area of household surveys was actually one of the key objectives of the Intersecretariat Working Group. But in our early years of activities, while we put a lot of focus on coordinating in areas like methodological development, we didn't actually really address the issue of how to coordinate household surveys within countries. And this was an area we felt deserved a lot more attention. From an early stage, it was clear that there were various ways the work could go. For example, there could be a focus on coordination across national or international agencies, coordination of activities within NSOs, the idea of a single coordinated system of surveys, and so on. All of these things somehow came up in discussion when we were trying to form our ideas of what to work on. But in addition, we were also hearing in other settings that a need for support on coordination of statistical systems, for example, through the Global Network of Institute and Statistical Training. This was also a major topic which came up. The countries felt that there was a need for support on coordination at the national level. But it somehow seems to be a topic that I think has fallen through the cracks. Maybe not entirely. I mean, Paris 21 obviously does a lot of work in helping countries to develop statistical plans, but there's no single agency which, for example, provides technical support on coordination in general within statistical systems. So I think it's fair to say that from an early stage, we were taking on something that was quite big and not very clearly defined, which was quite a challenge. So as a result, we had to work out early on what we thought we could usefully do to put some structure on this topic. And the choice we made, at least initially, was to undertake case studies of a selection of countries with different contexts and statistical systems, and to attempt to extract some messages on what coordination of household surveys looks like in those countries, what challenges they face, and what lessons could be learned. And that's what you're going to be hearing tonight from those countries. The case studies were quite challenging, and getting to this stage took longer than we originally planned from our side, which comes down to maybe possibly bad planning from our side. But I think, again, this goes back to a large degree to the breadth of the topic, but also to some extent to timing, which spanned across the period when activities were most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we started, after some initial brief research, we selected 5 countries to talk to. They're all joining us tonight, I'm very happy to say. They were Canada, Ireland, Costa Rica, Ghana, and Samoa. In addition, to bring something of a more regional perspective, we contacted the SPC to discuss their experience of supporting coordination of household surveys among the Pacific Island states. And we're very happy to be joined by Vils Galvin to talk something about the very interesting experience in that region. We gathered an extensive amount of information through the case studies with the countries, and it's fair to say it was very exploratory in nature, because we didn't have a very, very fixed set of questions we wanted to ask. We wanted to ask about, how were surveys coordinated in the countries? What do those countries find challenging? What do people think works well? Now, Before talking about what messages we took from the process, I do want to recognize a couple of limitations. First, to say that the countries we spoke to are generally quite heavily centralized in their household survey systems. And we're aware that there are systems where they're not very centralized, okay, that surveys are undertaken by a variety of different agencies. So we have to recognize that we may have heard different perspectives if we had worked with a different group of countries. But I would say, nonetheless, we think there were some interesting highlights that are relevant for all systems, no matter their structure or size. So coming to the messages, I mean, I'll be brief because I think the interesting part is when we hear from the countries. But it became obvious quite early on that when we talk about coordination in household surveys, in fact, it covers a range of overlapping issues. Firstly, and the thing we probably mostly think about is just coordination of activities across different agencies and people involved with household surveys. However, in addition, what started to come up very early in discussions was the topic of harmonization of processes, of definitions, of approaches through the application of common standards and so on. But there was a third theme, which was integration, whereby common activities are centralized. For example, a central sampling team, a central field management team, and so on. The relationship between these things in a system can be complex. For example, it can be that we might have very good coordination of activities across agencies, but it doesn't mean inputs or outputs will necessarily be harmonized. Likewise, a lack of coordination does not mean inputs or outputs cannot be harmonized if common standards are referred to. Now, integration is somewhat different in the sense that generally where activities are integrated, it means that it will be some coordination and harmonization, but it doesn't necessarily mean the entire system is coordinated. So we say coordination, and it can mean all of these different diverse things in reality. And this is really what came up in the early discussions with countries. So what we could observe from talking to countries is that all countries involved exercise coordination of some of their household survey activities through different mechanisms. And this is probably a common theme. It's mostly through formal coordination groups, multi-year planning, and so on. And an important message from all the countries involved was that having a strong role for a central agency, normally the National Statistical Office, was a key enabler of coordination. We're not going to pretend this is a new message. We've been hearing this message for probably 30, 40 years, but it's just very clear that it came across so strongly in the discussions again. Having a strong central NSO was a key enabler of good coordination. If the NSO, on the other hand, doesn't have a clear, strong mandate for coordination of activities, it can still happen, but it tends to be more complicated to achieve. We can also see that within the countries we reviewed, particularly some of them, there was a clear trend towards an increasing role for NSOs covered over time. So if I just take one example of Ireland, who you'll hear talking, there's actually been a trend of centralizing more and more surveys towards the NSO over time, surveys that used to be done by other agencies. And this, I believe, is also a pattern that was there in Canada. Now, harmonization was also generally applied on some scale, regardless of the country. For example, we'll hear from Ghana, and one of their activities was the development of a repository of definitions, which was used as a reference point by all agencies. And efforts like this are worthwhile and potentially impactful, even in some settings where the surveys are not centralized or heavily coordinated. Now, finally, just coming to integration, 3 of the countries we covered, namely Ireland, Costa Rica, and Canada, were either applying or attempting a higher level of integration of activities. In Canada's case, this is probably the most advanced, with a common integrated population register as the basis for the household survey system. And in that case, it can be seen that it evolved over a long period of time, rather than one big bang project that was planned and implemented at one point in time. Ireland is contrasting in the sense that a large-scale project was planned and implemented at a particular point in time over a number of years, with what I think it's fair to say was very good success, which led to a highly integrated set of household surveys. Costa Rica is still in the process of attempting to integrate more of their surveys. And the point is, there, I think, is that there's more than one way to achieve this objective. I would maybe refer to it as evolution or revolution. And it's not that there's one necessarily right way to do it, but if you are going to undertake a large scale kind of punctual project to try and improve coordination, it was very clear that you needed good senior level buy-in and dedicated resources to do it. It's not something, not a process to be taken lightly. A couple of last messages from me before handing over to the panel. A somewhat obvious message that we got from the work is that there cannot be any one size fits all solution or system for all countries. Okay, it seems almost too obvious to say, but it is very evident from the discussions that we have. But there are common objectives. Countries with relatively lesser resources and infrequent ad hoc surveys cannot realistically target the type of integration we now see in Ireland and Canada, for example, but efforts at coordination of activities and harmonisation are still relevant and worthwhile. Similarly, we can't promote a single survey system on a global scale that would be right for all countries because country context, priorities and resources will largely determine what can and should be done. This might be achievable, however, on a regional or a sub-regional basis, and I think the SPC example is a very good one of this. There is an attempt to achieve a harmonised household survey system, which I believe has had actually very, very good results. So that's why SPC is an interesting example. But that's not going to be realistic globally, even though countries will generally have some sort of common elements like a labour force survey on some sort of regular basis. Now, with that said, sharing practices, standards, guidance and tools are still worthwhile and help countries to improve their systems in all cases. And multi-year planning can also be good. Now, finally, for now, before I hand over, I will say there was a theme that came up in the discussions about improved coordination of activities of international organizations. It wasn't not the central focus of the discussions, but it did come up on more than one occasion, it's fair to say. And the message there is that uncoordinated approaches by different organizations creates pressures for countries. And it was a strong message in some of the countries we spoke to. Now, the good news I'd say there is that one of the objectives of the Intersecretariat Working Group and Household Survey is to achieve improvements in this. And I do think it's fair to say that there have been improvements, but it's clear that more can and should be done, particularly in coordinating support at country level. So with all of that said, the case study reports and an overview report with summary messages has now been published on the website of the Intersecretariat Working Group, and I believe Howie has shared links in the chat in case you would like to see those outputs. And now I would like to get to the interesting part of the session, where we hear from the countries about their experiences and lessons learned. Because in the end, I actually think on this topic, that is one of the most valuable things we can do is provide a mechanism for the sharing of experiences at country level. So this will be a Q&A panel, and it will be moderated by Howie Chen of the United Nations Statistics Division of UNDESA. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Kieran. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate, and Kieran and I have been working together for a couple of years on this and keeping each other in company. It's really great experience working with you. It's really a great honor to have all our countries. I was very, very happy to see we were able to bring all of you together with the working time zone, surprisingly. So really great to have you here. And then today we have a great panelist from 6 entities, 6 countries, but Gavin next wear 2 hats. So he will talk about New Zealand and also the Pacific community. And I will just introduce them very, very briefly and then give them time to introduce themselves and their work as the part of the first question. So today we have Silan Bullet, who's the section chief in the Social Statistics Methods Division at Stats Canada. We have Braulio, who's the Labor Force Survey Coordinator from Costa Rica. Peter, Assistant Chief Statistician, Ghana Statistical Service. Fiona, Head of Division in charge of the Transformation and Household Surveys from Ireland. Hi, Assistant Chief Executive Officer from Samoa Bureau of Statistics, and lastly, and not the least last, Vince Govan, who's a chief methodologist from Stats New Zealand. He's also leading the work on the Pacific Statistics Method Board and others at this Pacific community. So through this panel, we hope to really foster a discussion on what we have learned, what worked in your country, and what you've learned from your process in making survey more coordinated, integrated, and harmonized. I will have a few round of questions for you, and then we would love to hear from you, your thoughts and reflections, and what you can offer to others, and how we can help, how we can do better as from the international community. As Kieran said, we are very self-critical, but it has been very difficult for us to sort of shake ourselves up. I think it's the message is stronger that we need to work better together as international community if the message comes from you. Right. So now I try to keep 10 minutes for each round of question. Then we have some time for the Q&As. So my first question, I'll start with, so I'll go from, so Canada and Costa Rica, so I would not call upon you to save some time, but let's start with Silan. My first question is if you can briefly introduce yourself and say a few words about the household survey system in Canada, including surveys carried out in your office, the frequency, what additional surveys, basically a really, really brief intro of the survey system in Canada. And then we can go from there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, let me say just how much a pleasure it is to have been able to participate with you on this project, and just how happy I am to be here today. So my name is Silane Boulet. I am chief in the Social Statistics Methods Division. So this means I'm a methodologist. I've been working at StatCan as a methodologist since 2011. At the moment, I'm responsible for the methodology side of new collection initiatives that are being put in place as part of our modernization initiatives. As an introduction to StatCan and maybe our context from the household surveys point of view. So we're a very large national statistical organization with thousands of employees. We run dozens of regular social surveys, some that are monthly, quarterly, annually. We have a whole large suite, a labor workforce survey, general social survey, health surveys, on top of the census and of post-census surveys as well. On top of that, there's many ad hoc household surveys that are run, and those the census of population as well that feeds into social statistics. So we've got a very large number of activities going on the social statistics side of things, and it takes up a large part of the agency. In terms of coordination, this means a really, really high need for coordination and also a lot of opportunity to build harmonization into our programs. One important thing to say is, though we are a large agency, we are not the only statistical agency in the country. And so coordination with our partners is important, and it's sort of built into our structures. So we've got provincial and territorial statistical agencies with whom we coordinate through having a federal, provincial, territorial council that meets regularly to discuss objectives, to discuss methods, etc. And we have a strategic engagement division specifically to be responsible for stakeholder engagement that we work with. In the interest of time, I could go on and on, but in the interest of time, maybe we can go around the room for introductions.
Thank you so much. Next, can we go to Braulio?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Well, as how I say, my name is Braulio Villegas. Right now, I'm working as a coordinator coordinator of the labor force survey in Costa Rica. But also have been working in the new project that try to implement and integrate household survey system. So I have been working in both parts in the design of surveys, but also in the analysis of the data and the relation with the users of the information of the institution. Well, our system right now, well, it's most focused within the institution. We already right now we are a smaller institution. Maybe we have 4 main household surveys. The national survey on income and expenditure, which is we have it each 5 years. The national household survey, which is used to measure poverty, which is yearly, and the national household of microenterprises survey, also yearly. Also the labor force survey, which is, well, works all the year, continuous, but the design is to provide quarterly data. Also, the institution conduct what we call special surveys, which are surveys requested by other organizations that are not necessarily part of the annual work plan. Like, well, those surveys cover topics like time management, disabilities, health, among others. These special surveys change. The topic of these surveys change every year and depends on, well, demand of the users, what is in the law. Sometimes there are demanding by law, or depending what the institutions needs.
Thank you so much, brother. Now I'd like to invite Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hi. Hi, good evening. And thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Peter Techipipra. I am an assistant chief statistician and the director of field operations for the Ghana Statistical Service. Regarding surveys that we've been doing or we've been conducting, but we have several. We've been carrying out the Ghana Living Standard Survey, the Demographic and Health Survey, the Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, Maternal Health Survey, Malaria Indicator Survey. We also have the Annual Household Income and Expenditure Survey, and some ad hoc ones, which include domestic violence, time use, which we've conducted. Currently, we are also preparing to roll out a Greek survey. And just this week, we are doing, or we've sent field officers out to collect data on stepwise survey that's on non-communicable diseases risk factors. And in fact, Statistical Service is the institution in Ghana that is mandated to carry out nationwide surveys. And now that the National Statistical System has also been strengthened, we have the power, or we've been given the mandate to coordinate all ministries, agencies, and departments that are also producing statistics to guide policy. There is one thing that has also been put out there, which almost all institutions are doing their best to adhere to. Thus, if the institution attempts to conduct a survey, they ensure that they have Statistical Service staff represented, so that at least that person can guide them in terms of the methodology, the standardization of the questionnaire, and anything that is expected of us to ensure that at least we adhere to the standards and methods that are required at the international level. So I think I can leave it here for now. And if questions are thrown out, I can add on. Thank you. And over.
Thank you so much, Peter. Now I'd like to move on to Fiona.
Thanks, Howie. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I work for the Central Statistics Office in Ireland. It's a relatively small organisation by comparison with our colleagues in Canada. It's about 1,000 people work here. So I have the overall responsibility for collection of household statistics, and that my role spans the first 4 phases of the GSBPM for those of you who are familiar with it. So it's the specify needs, design, build, collection, and some of the processing. So that's what our role is. And once that role is complete, then we hand it over to the analysis areas who disseminate. Kieran mentioned that we went through a huge transformation project in the early noughties, and that has continued at a pace for the last almost 20 years now. And we have a very process-based approach. We have a lot of surveys. I think I'm the only person on the call who is subject to EU regulation. So we're under regulation for the labour force survey, for the income and living conditions, a lot of similar surveys to previous colleagues have mentioned, but we're under regulation, and we've had a harmonisation regulation put in place. So our surveys are beginning to look and feel the same across a spectrum, which is a really good thing from a respondent and from, I suppose, from a statistical standpoint. But the interesting part that when we were working with Kieran and Howie on this was that they were interested in asking us, how we managed our many surveys. And I suppose the one thing that we are working on is a centralized approach, and that has brought us to be experts. And I was listening to Peter previously speaking about, we're involved in a lot of surveys now that we don't necessarily collect, but we're asked for our expertise on them as well, because we've set up the process in that approach, and that's the way we're continuing on. Okay, Howie.
Very interesting. Yes. Thank you, Fiona. We'll hear more about the transformation and how you did it. Vince Garvin, Vince, you wear 2 hats, so maybe you can have 1 more minute. You're from Stats New Zealand and SPC.
So thank you. Hello to everybody, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. So my name's Vince Galvin, and my day job is to be the Chief Methodologist of Stats New Zealand, but I'll mainly be talking today about my role as chair of something called the Pacific Standards and Methods Board, which was a group established at one of our Pacific regional coordination meetings, and it was established because of the circumstances that a lot of the Pacific countries found themselves in, namely that we had managed to get an outlined 5-year work program, and the amount of time and effort that was going to be spent on running household surveys looking ahead was very large. Even so, the obligations to meet all the reporting of SDGs and so forth was quite extensive. And the countries were concerned that it would be good to give collective effort to how best to organise ourselves to move forward with meeting all these obligations. So that's, and in talking about that, when I do get the chance to answer the question, I think I will probably simply be emphasising some of the points that Kieran was ran through quickly in his excellent summary. So I'll probably be just going here to the various things at various points that Kieran said. But anyway, let's hope at least Kieran will find that a reinforcing experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. Now let's move on to the second question. If you can highlight
Have you done Thai?
Oh yeah, sorry, no, Thai. What's wrong with me? Thai. Sorry. Apologies. Thai. If you can introduce the work of Samoa and Hasser.
Okay, Thanks, Kevin, for reminding highway about Samoa. Anyways, Talofa and greetings from Samoa. I am Taya Apofamuna. You can call me Tai, the Assistant Chief Executive Officer for Census, Surveys and Demography Division of the Samoa Bureau of Statistics. And our division is mainly lead the population and housing surveys and some of the social surveys, namely the demographic and health survey, multiple indicator cluster survey, disability surveys. For the Samoa Bureau of Statistics, we do have a strategy which was first established in 2021, 2011. And in that strategy, we did list, all the collection or the survey activities from 2011 to 2021. And in this strategy was revised and renewed in with the new one. We have a new strategy with from the 2022 to 2026, and this is the the plan where we list and base all surveys on a frequent basis. Where because for this year we have what we call multiple indicator cluster survey, mix plus, in which we are working with the UNICEF, and that's started from 2022 until this year, end of this year. We also had a labor force survey last year, and for this year we are conducting the household income and expenditure survey for the whole year, and this is the first time that we are taking this initiative of having the highs for the whole year. And we are also in planning of the we have what we call national ID mass registration, where we also use the household frame as a baseline for that activity. And also we are planning a demographic health survey, multiple indicator survey 2024, and other the agriculture survey 2025, and also another census 2026, because for the population and housing census, we conduct it for every 5 years. So I think I'll stop from here, but I will share more on other questions when I given the opportunity. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Tai. Apologize again for my omission. We would definitely love to hear from you, because we had talked a lot about how you managed to put DHS and mix together in one of the survey runs, I think, recently. Now, let me move on to the second question. I sort of put the two together. If you can, from each panelist, you can reflect on 1 to 2 things that, or the efforts that you've made that really worked. What makes it successful to make your household survey more integrated, harmonized, or coordinated? And what are the challenges that you would like to give advice to others and try to avoid this route? It's not going to work. I'm going a little bit extreme, but just your reflections. What has worked? What didn't really work? What was the reason behind it? Possible reason behind it? Should I go from the beginning to the end? Oh, okay. For the next question, I'll go in a different direction. So give you a bit heads up. Now, Silan, you start.
So just to check, you're looking for the things that have made it work as well as the things that have been challenges? Okay. So you asked when we prepared things for 1 or 2 things that were sort of our favorites on that. In fact, from my perspective, it was really, really hard to pick along the lines, because we are working towards harmonization from the beginning to the end, from building of the questionnaires to testing them to putting them into an electronic format to be used to collection management portals. We've got all these tools all the way to even dissemination, having standardized processes and standardized tools to use. But if I have to pick, then I'll mention two of them. One is the work that we've done in building up frames for household surveys. So Canada is not a country that maintains a population register for administrative purposes. There is no lists of everybody when you move. You don't necessarily need to update your address in that particular way. So we don't have a centralized repository of where everyone is, but we have built frames of addresses or dwelling frames that have turned out to be very, very useful and have reaped a lot of benefits. We're moving at the moment from our first generation of frames where we had not just an address list, but also the contact information that goes with it and some basic social demographic information if available. Not available for everybody, but if available, and that turned out to be very useful. We're moving towards the next generation of our frames, and so I think this is one point that's worth making, is that even though we've worked on this over the course of decades, the work in terms of coordination doesn't finish. And so we need to plan very carefully and work carefully as we go into continuous improvements and then new iterations of the tools that we're working with. The challenges of coordination are sort of ongoing, but the benefits of having put those things in place is really, really huge. The second highlight that I wanted to mention was our social data linkage environment. So it's an environment in which we've put together to do linkages between various files. It has a spoke and hub type of setup so that every time we've got an administrative data file or a survey that we want to link, we link to a central hub and keep just a linkage key, not a file with all of the variables on it, but just a linkage key to the central hub so that once you've linked one source and a second source, then you can deduce a link between those sources subsequently. And it has increased the quality of our linkages as well. The reason that I wanted to mention that one in particular is that it's core to being able to move in a direction towards going more towards administrative first type of approaches, where we try to take advantage of all the administrative data that we have before considering household surveys as a second option, and having that environment is really key to be able to go in those directions. In terms of challenges, I would say one of the things that has been a challenge for us is maintaining the connection between our systems. So we've got many of these harmonized systems, but integrating from one step to the next, and then we've got a need for a strong metadata system to back it up, to be able to move between those systems. That's something that we really need to work on and remains a challenge. And also one other bit that remains a challenge is that when you've got all of these systems in place, they're immensely helpful, but it does make it a little bit harder to remain flexible and put in place new solutions when we need to be a little bit more creative. And so there can be a compromise that's needed between the level of harmonization and flexibility that can come out of it.
Thank you so much. I hear quite a few things. Transformation has to be ongoing. The frames, which has been a challenge. We actually wanted to do a section just on sample frames. And social, because I see countries like Canada, US, and going so well to the next generations of, and then countries that are still using a 10 years old census frame that doesn't have any, so outdated. Yeah, this is something forthcoming under the Intersector Working Group on Household Surveys. So social data linkage is very interesting. And then first approach, of course, that's been huge. Everyone wants to move. I'm working on a data story for the SDG report. All countries wanted to move to that direction. Challenges, connections, and metadata base metadata system, and flexibility. Interesting. Now move to my second colleague, Braulio. Your turn.
Well, in terms of national integration, or at least harmonization through the different institutions, a few years ago, by law, the country implement the National Statistics System, which is an office in charge of the management of the official statistics produced in the country. So it's really, I think it's not really new, but it's still in working and developing tools to harmonize and to implement or to implement methodologies, harmonized methodologies through all the institutions and that produce official statistics, which go beyond the household surveys, right? In terms of within the institution, we have been working in, as I mentioned previously, the project tried to establish integrated household survey system because we know that we have been having trouble with the harmonization through different household surveys, which there is no many of them, but they are carried out by different work teams. So from 10 years ago, from now, there have been some changes, but each one have been individually developed. So it has been an issue for us. So we have been trying to harmonize and to integrate all the efforts in terms of the production of household surveys statistics. I think that is still work to do in these terms, but have been advanced in the last few years. Maybe what have been PIVOS problems or more difficult to implement is the IT systems. It requires really a lot of development of new tools, and sometimes more in the pandemic, we have to redirect efforts to face the pandemic and the effects in the statistical production. So it had been a really important issue for us.
Thank you so much. So, Braulio, is your office is part of the newly established NSS, National Statistical System, right?
No, the office is not new. It had been, as an institution, it had been working for 3 decades. But the National Statistical System as an entity, as an individual entity, it was like established, like formally established a few years ago with the new law.
Thank you. Very interesting for that. And then really huge amount of work in harmonization and putting surveys. It's a huge, I mean, Fiona can say more about it. Started 1990s, so I think it will continue. Now let's move on to Peter.
All right, thank you. Ghana also has made some efforts to harmonize or integrate surveys. And I will say, as Walsh mentioned in his introduction, in 2012, Ghana managed to develop a document called Compendium on Definitions of Concepts, and then standardized or found a way to standardize questions and responses, not for the National Statistical Office alone, but for other individuals, smaller agencies that carried out some studies, because occasionally they try to compare the results to some existing results or indicators. So we ensured that they standardize the instruments in order not to have any conflicting or throughout conflicting information of which will be called to come and explain or defend. Aside that, we've been successful on one or two occasions to merge or to integrate some household surveys. I remember in 2012, 2013, when we implemented the Ghana Living Standards Survey, around that same time, the UN also brought a questionnaire or wanted Ghana Statistical Service to carry out a survey on governance, peace, and security. And looking at how our sampling technique for the Living Standard Survey how it had been designed, we realized that it could be, all the two surveys can be integrated. And therefore, we incorporated it into it and implemented that survey. We've also managed to have demographic and health survey and then malaria indicator survey, multiple indicator cluster survey, and malaria indicator survey. In fact, that of mix was in 2011. 2014, we did DHS and malaria, before later we had a standalone survey. But as the question goes, how have we had a successful exercise? I think the successful or the success story, I would say, emerged from effective collaboration among stakeholders within the NSS or the National Statistical System. And more especially if the methodology and the strategies that we are putting in place to gather the data talk to each other, it becomes a bit easier because it's easy to standardize the approach in coming up with the results. Another one is the time or the timing for the collection of the data. For instance, if you are doing malaria indicator survey in Ghana, you are expected to collect the data between August and December. So assuming a study is being implemented in the first 2 quarters of the year, there is no way that you can combine malaria with it. So that integration will be a bit challenging unless, as a country, the steering committee and the technical advisory committee and the agency that require or that need the data for planning and policy direction are all on board, or we are all on the same wavelength that we've agreed to implement it within a particular time. But we shouldn't forget that all these are also in conformity with the work plan that has been designed to implement it and the institutional work plan. If you plan to implement a project in the first half of the year, and as a result of integration or harmonization, it happens that it has to be carried out in the last 2 quarters of the year, then it means that decisions have to be made at a higher level, even including the National Statistics Advisory Committee and the board of the institution to agree that, okay, fine, we will all wait and implement it in a particular period. However, looking at the challenges as he wanted us to link to what we've been asked to talk about. It is a bit difficult to integrate surveys when questions in the two surveys are more or less scanty. More especially if I say scanty, questions in survey A that appear in survey B are not much. For instance, if you are carrying out demographic and health survey and multiple indicator cluster survey, of which somewhere in 2014, stakeholders were lobbying that we put the two together. You ask yourself, what is DHS measuring? What is mixed measuring? Of course, both measure maternal and child health issues, but mixed move further to look at child discipline, early childhood development, child protection, early marriage, foundation learning skills for children in the age bracket of 7 to 14, whereas DHS is restricted to women in the reproductive age brackets. So you look at all these and ask yourself, where do you draw the line? If you are putting them together, are you now going to look at population in all the age brackets in the mixed eligibilities? Beside that, in doing that also, you will realize that the sample design for mix is slightly different from that of the DHS, in that we try to have representation for children under 5, representation for children 5 to 17, for the women in the reproductive age bracket, and likewise men in the reproductive age bracket. So you could see that the design in mix is slightly different from that of DHS. One critical thing also that Ghana has experienced recently is the measurement of food insecurity. The Comprehensive Food Security and Vulnerability Analysis Study, which is being rolled out by World Food Programme, has a way of computing it relying on food consumption score and then other parameters from the wealth quintiles in computing population that are food insecure compared to that of FAO. Both are UN bodies, but the FAO rely on what? Fees. It's sometimes as the one institution or the same national statistical institution going out there to report that food insecure population is. For instance, from the Comprehensive Food Security, we had 11.7% of the population being food insecure. And then we moved on to the fees, just a year reporting that 50% of Ghanaians are food insecure. The question was, what is happening in the country? And looking at the economic crunch, people thought, hey, then within a short time, a lot of people in the country are suffering. Then the next day, the politicians also will come in to inquire what is happening. So some of these things sometimes gives us a bit of challenges to address. But on the whole, sometimes funding also becomes a critical thing. If an institution is providing funds to get a project implemented, it looks like they have little control over what needs to be done. Merging projects, no, we want ours this way, so we don't want to add on and so on and so forth. So these are some of the challenges that I would like to touch on at this stage, and as we move along, others may come up. Thank you, and over.
I feel so sad hearing that. We will talk about that hopefully in the Q&A session, because I think it's going to come out. Given the time constraint, like, can we move down, Fiona?
Yeah, thanks very much. All right, thank you. Yeah, I find it difficult to follow that, but anyway, I'll try and work through it. So we obviously, as I said, we're on transformation project, and one of the successes that I want to talk about is, I suppose, harmonization of some of our surveys, right? That we've worked very hard to try and get the look and feel, even though we're very constrained by regulation, but we have tried to get their questionnaires, the look and feel of them, very similar. This brings a level of data quality that is really good, because our interviewers, when they're asking, for example, income, consumption and wealth type surveys like HFCS or STILC, our wealth surveys, they ask questions in the same way, and they're used to those kind of blocks. So we get really good data harmonization in terms of quality of data. We don't get too many outliers, we don't get too much unit non-response, etc., etc. So that element of the harmonization has been really successful for us. Similarly, we now have adopted on I don't think we're unusual in this, in respondent first type approach to all of our surveys. So now we're looking at the best way to approach our respondent, to make sure that, because as you know, response rates are falling and we have to do everything we can, so we're giving them choice. And we are trying in our best way to make sure that the respondent is catered for in our surveys, and we use simple language, etc., etc. They're the kind of the really nice pieces that have come out of our transformation project as we've moved on. But the challenges remain, and I'm sure that some of the challenges remain that they were 20 years ago. The demand for data, though, is increasing, so we constantly have to stave off more longer questionnaires, which we know will not do well. So that is always a challenge, saying to people, no, you can't put that question in there, or else do you want the data or do you want the response? So I can see my colleagues nodding, which means that I'm not too far off the mark with when it comes to other countries. So that is always a challenge. But back to my Canadian colleague, the other part that we're really doing, that we're trying to do more and more on, is the data linkage. Admin data first, trying to see if something exists. But that's a circular part of our transformation then, because we are also trying to act as the data steward within the public service in Ireland, to make sure that the similar identifiers, similar classifications, similar standards are used across the board, to make sure that the data that's coming from these administrative sources are usable, as opposed to using a very expensive type of primary data collection, right? So that's what we're trying to do. So it goes round in circles a bit. It does go round in circles, but slowly we're getting there. And if you build up the expertise, and I think we are getting through to other bodies to say, yes, let's change classification. Let's make it all one, so that we can harmonise across the public sector and use this, statistical asset that they don't even know they're collecting. So that's kind of where we are. We're getting there. I do think we're making progress, so yeah. So thanks, Howie.
Thank you so much, Fiona. We lead the Secretary Working Group on Household Surveys, also starting a new task force on respondent centered design, and that's led by UK ONS, our colleagues from UK. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in joining, I'd be very curious to hear how you convince the admin data holders, like, change your classification definition, because we always hear that
very slowly.
That's not designed. It's not designed for statistical purposes. They have their own admin objective. Now, without further, let me move on to Ty.
You're on mute.
You muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Thanks, Howie. For the summer period statistics, to us, for one or two things, efforts that make surveys more integrated, we need to have a well-established household frames, which is the tool where we have the selection of households for any surveys. So in that areas, that the household IDs in terms of the GPS codes are unique, and we as I heard from the others, we also added the contact numbers. So whatever time we do a survey, we not only we have that frame where we do select the households, but we should have the secure and unique GPS codes. So in terms of integration, uh, we did integrate two surveys, the THS and the mix for the first time. And I have, as mentioned by our colleague from Ghana, we did the similar process where from the yes, but not in the mix, because yeah, as noted, mix is more details and collect more indicators uh, rather than the THS. So we had worked on trying to, see what models are in the DHS, but not in the mix. Then we have to add in the mix. The other area that we are now working on with other ministries is another project named street naming, and we believe that with that project, it will also be assisted not only with our household frame, but also it will help a lot with you know updating our frame for any surveys. So we are one of the ministries in that the task force for that project for our government. And another project that it's also under our ministries is the national ID. This is a new project and also a new division in our ministry or under the Samoa Bureau of Statistics. So we will work on that project as well, so that it will for ease of linking people's information. And the advantage of this is because this project is under the, as I said, it is under the bureau. And also the births, deaths, and marriages division, it is also under the bureau. So we'll try and work and integrate all the information from three different projects, like the national ID and the births, deaths, marriage division, as well as the census. So to us, this is one of the advantage, or for the bureau to integrate and harmonize some of the information, especially the demographic information of people using the census, the national ID, as well as the births, deaths, and marriage division. In terms of challenges, the main challenges faced by SPS is the lack of resources, both financially and technically. When we do have surveys under the strategy, it's usually funded by the government. While additional data collection, we rely on development partners. We also have technical skills that in various areas of survey operation, such as survey design, managing, uh, survey processes, database development, data collection, application development, and data analysis, as well as managerial and ICT skills. With the increasing demand for data and changes in technology, modern technology infrastructure and new digital skills are required to plan and organize household surveys. So there is also a shortage of workforce at the Bureau, with a limited number of people filling a wide variety of roles. For example, the survey manager is just one person who is coordinating the whole survey for a specific survey, whether it is regular or ad hoc. So when the manager is sick or not available due to some unforeseen matters, the flow of the survey coordination is disrupted. So this is the same with the data processing team and the census and survey division. So a short-term solution to date is to reach out to technical and financial partners for support in different phases of the survey processes. So the support helps to lessen the workload of the staff, and at the same time, it helps to improve the capacity of the staff through sharing of knowledge and expertise. So the lack of adequate physical infrastructure for conducting operations and at the Bureau has affected work output. So also a statistical office needs to be able to demonstrate to providers of statistical information that their data is held securely. The current physical premises are not able to be configured to provide good and log storage. So records management for statistical records in particular is weak. So the office needs an enabling environment for the efficient production of statistics. So even though Samoa adopts a largely centralized statistical system, household surveys are carried out by SPS and various line ministries. Given that the project only collaborates with SPS, it is difficult to have a comprehensive view of how national interesting points came out from the information provided by SPS. So the first relates to the engagement of SPS in surveys carried out by other ministries and the fact that the data are considered official only if SPS is part of the operation. It is unclear at what level SPS is engaged in non-SPS surveys, but this engagement helps with coordination across entities. So I think that's from some of the integration, harmonization, and also challenges and some solutions that we are facing. Thank you and
Thank
over.
you so much. Thank you so much, Ty, for sharing. Interesting to hear about the DHX mix and then your role in working with other surveys. Now I'd like to move to Gavin.
I'm Vince. Okay, so I'll keep moving because I'm obviously interest of time, but here we go. 3 good things and 3 challenges. I'm breaking the rules. Good thing number 1, keeping the plan, the program of surveys that need to be undertaken up to date and looking ahead and making sure things are funded. You can't integrate things which you don't know whether they're going to happen or not. While this hasn't been perfect and it's been all sorts of challenges, the Pacific countries have managed to run more surveys in the last 5 or 10 years than they did before that, and it's partly just because the objectives of what they're trying to do are much clearer. Great tribute to colleagues at SPC for creating an environment and bringing to the methods board a situation where we get funded to do experiments in different countries, but we treat it as though it's just one big happy family learning from each other, whether it's Ty and her splendid colleagues at Samoa doing experiments with nutritional value of food eaten away from the home, or the Marshall Islands doing an experiment on the length of the recall in the Hess diary, or Kiribati experimenting with how to put a labour force survey module in their census. So experiments we can all learn from. And the other thing that we did that helped both standardise and make things address some of the challenges that Ty was just talking about was combining the training and the planning of surveys. So we looked ahead at our program, saw that we had a whole range of HESs coming up in the next year and a half or so, rounded up absolutely anybody who was going to run a HES, tried to simplify all the survey design training material, brought everybody together for a couple of weeks where the goal was both to deliver the training, but to get people halfway through having done the design for their surveys. So it was practical, which of course the fact that it was all done together, people did it more efficiently because they're all talking to each other, and we had a lot of the providers in the region, Stats New Zealand, ABS, the World Bank and United Nations agencies had set their survey experts, so that it was a lot of fun. 2 weeks on household surveys. I'm sure everybody here would be jealous that they weren't there. And I'd have to say the other good thing about the program is it's enabled some actual sharing of tablets and tools. So Tonga in particular has been generous about providing the actual tools, the tablets it used to other countries to use in their surveys, which has been absolutely fantastic of them. Challenges. So first one is probably just the enduring challenge of trying to scale down some of the solutions that are prepared in more sophisticated countries so that they can be implemented in the Pacific. This is very much Kieran's one size fits all. Some of the countries, the smallest countries in the Pacific are sovereign nations of 2,000 people. And that means that the stats office has 2 people in them. There is a strict limit on what those good folk can do. That's probably an unusual for everybody else, but trying to work out how to give people the benefits of thinking in admin data, for example, is something that we would, we're still, that's hard. The sheer demand on countries, small countries, to produce a full range of statistics needs some intellectual attention by people. A small country, the government of a very small country, does not have the same options of things it's actually going to do as the government of a large industrial country. It's not trying to manage a currency. It's not trying to make decisions about where to put hospitals and roads, because the country's so small that doesn't happen much. And I think actually giving serious thought as the range of things a government can do diminishes with its size, how that should impact on taking the demand for collecting statistics off countries is something that the countries themselves are not in a position to articulate and give time and thought to. And it would be very much appreciated if intellectual energy could be applied to that to that issue. Similarly, just to also pick up on something that Kieran mentioned in his summary at the beginning, we have on the methods board, we have representatives from UN countries, and they have been wonderful at trying to help us rationalize content across surveys, and you've heard the discussion from both Ty and Peter about mix and DHS. We're trying to find ways ahead with that. In particular, making sure. So I've seen some wonderful tools that have been designed around the surveys themselves. But of course, you don't want to end up with the content of these surveys tied up with the tool that implements them, because the only hope for doing a lot of useful collection in very small countries is having the content free of the tool that implements it. So they have to be neutral about that, and they have to be able to be implemented in things. And we've had some, and I mentioned a couple of the experiments that we've had to do, but it puts a little bit of burden on very small countries, and us running around to help them. And it would be fantastic to have more thought put into how content can be more sort of interchangeable, interoperable across those collections. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I think many of those were not exactly reflected in the report. Maybe we need to go back to the SPC report and put some of the points there. Now, given the time, so I would like to, if each one of you can have a minute and a half. The last question, I'm going to cut the last question, is what the future, look into the future, what are things you wanted to happen? It would be great to have happen, and what would you need to make it happen in terms of better coordination? I'll start with you, Vince. Then we go backwards. Is that okay?
Look, honestly, I think I probably said some of my little wish list in that last ramble. So I won't repeat what I just said. The only other thing that I might is worth mentioning is that some of the countries of the Pacific are more vulnerable to extreme weather impacts and the impacts of climate change than anywhere else on the planet. And some of them are in the position where they're doing their own novel work in terms of how designing questions to understand how those sorts of events are playing out on households, because it's more totally immediate. Some countries are looking at buying land in other countries to move their whole country away from where they are. The scale and immediacy of the challenge in the Pacific of dealing with, Vanuatu had 2 huge weather events in 1 week. Both of which caused incredible destruction, and the whole and some of these areas of statistics down the list a bit in terms of where they tend to be in terms of priorities, but they are very, very big for countries in the Pacific, and again an area where more energy and thought in places with more resources and how we can have this more like tools that we can roll out in places would be absolutely fantastic, and we'll try and do our best from within our own resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is very insightful. I think it points to a lot of things that our group should start working on, right? What are the thing, of course, in collaboration with all the colleagues here. Now I'd like to move to Thai. If there's something you would like to achieve.
Yeah, thank you. As mentioned by Calvin, one of the challenges that we always face is, the vulnerability of our small island countries, and to us, especially when we face, not only climate change challenges during surveys or data collection, we also experience this during the COVID-19. I think the integration process is the other important area where we really need to, especially with the international partners, to assist. As I was trying to explain the way we were working with the DHS mix, but we were also wanted to, to improve that part of the process where we can integrate data from other surveys or other, especially the administrative data, to assist in times of disasters, so that because we always do go out to collect the data from households, but once there's a disaster, it's so hard to go out. So this is one of the areas that I really wanted to improve in our area, especially for the Samopio statistics, the data integration, using not only with the admin data, but also from the household. So I did do some research with the Stats New Zealand and ABS on the ways that they did this kind of process. So this is one of the areas that I really wanted to, to learn more, so that it will save us from times of disasters. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Thai. Data integration is also key to our hearts for the Intersector Working Group, and I believe our colleagues from Malaysia is also on the call. They are leading work on this, yet we haven't yet to start because of HR issue right now. Now I'd like to move on to Fiona. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, thanks again. How? Yeah, it's a similar theme, very different situation in Ireland, but yes, integrated again, that the data across the whole spectrum of the NSI is that it's all integrated. And I'm talking about we are separated from our business statistics, but there are overlaps. So we're trying to integrate that. You can only get value add, because we don't have the issues with climate change that other colleagues have, but we do have issues with response rates. People don't want to answer our questions. They don't want to leave into their household. So when we do knock, it's because we really should have to. So that's where we need to get to, is that, we did a sexual violence survey last year in Ireland, and we had to ask people about that because there is no admin data. So that should be where we arrive at, that when we're knocking at people's doors, it's because we really have to, that we're looking for a qualitative experience rather than, that admin data should be easier to get. And that's really where we want to be. That's where I'd like to be, but we're getting there, but it's just a bit slower than it should be, I think. But this kind of collaboration is really good, because you hear from colleagues and you understand that everybody's facing some very similar challenges, albeit in different environments,
Yep. No, definitely. Thank you for the suggestion. I think I'm skipping the last question. This what we can do as from the international community, but I think we have got a lot of input on this. Now I'd like to move on to Peter. Hi, Peter.
Yes. How are you? Thank you very much. I would say that all that we need at the moment is to learn, and learn. Because I could see that Canada and Ireland are far ahead of us, even though we are always implementing surveys. And therefore, at least from the submissions we've made this evening, I think it would be good a platform is created for us to learn from them. Why am I saying that? Currently, we have this project, as I mentioned, annual household income and expenditure survey, currently ongoing. And at the same time, we are rolling out Ghana Living Standard Survey. If you look at the content of the questionnaires, they are almost the same. That of income and expenditure, I would say, is a subset because the GSS has a bigger questionnaire, likewise a bigger sample size. At a point, we were being asked, why don't you put them together? But we realized that's maybe I would say the methodology, the sample technique, and how it was planned wasn't adequate enough to put the two together. However, the IHIS, or the Annual Household Income Survey, is a panel which is being carried out for 3 years, whereas that of GLSS is cross-sectional for 1 year, 12 months data collection. So maybe if we get another opportunity to sit down with you, I believe we can, or the experts at UN Statistics Division, we can learn a lot and see how best in future we can merge the two or integrate the two to get a better way of implementing it. Even though you've not asked us to talk about, ask you about your support, but definitely I believe in some of these areas, your support will be needed. Likewise, merging or integrating a survey like demographic and health survey and the multiple indicator cluster survey, I believe the discussion should start from the top. If I say the top, the HQs, and therefore that one maybe UN Statistics Division has to pick it up and see how best we can put the surveys together to make savings or for a cost effectiveness. So I will end here. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Peter. I love that. I love that. I think the experts like here, right? All the speakers and also people who are in the audience, they're experts in household surveys in their countries. So let's have all these exchange of experience and having one focus of meeting that. And if Peter, you would like to have more information on how to integrate the two, we can just have one session focused on that. Another UN Statistics Division, I'm not taking away the responsibility. Kieran, we did a session with DHS and Mix together. Do you remember that? With our colleagues from DHS Mix. It wasn't very easy, but at least that was the first step. Now I'd like to move on to Braulio.
Yeah, well, definitely the effectiveness of the use of the resources and the problem with the response rates is an issue also here in Costa Rica, and the use of ministry registers, the integration of different sources of data to get more information, to do the statistical production more less costly, definitely is something that will help us to improve our work, right? So for us, definitely it is the guides or methodologies to do this kind of work definitely will be really useful in the future.
Thank you so much, Braulio. Response rate is only going to decline, right? Not going up, which is sad. Now, Dylan, your turn. I think you have the solution for us.
that made me laugh a little bit to think that we have the solutions. we do have a very strongly integrated system. It's taken us decades, and it's taken putting in place an organizational structure to help us bring there. And yet, it still makes me laugh to think that we would have the solutions. I think, in fact, that there's a lot that we can learn through extra communications that we were having. You said that you'd skip the last question in terms of what can be done, but I wanted to highlight that a little bit, because from these types of projects that put together and go through country reviews and talk about these key issues, there's a lot that can be learned across the board. And so that is one of the things that I would like to see, is a continued effort along those lines. The last two people to speak talked about declining response rates in particular. It's a challenge that faces us as well. It's the biggest challenge that we're facing. So if we can put in place coordinated structures that aren't just isolated, within Citizens Canada, we've done a lot to be integrated and to be coordinated. But if the more we can spread that out and benefit from the experience of others and through communication, I think that would be an excellent thing to keep on doing. So I want to thank you for your efforts in that end.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, we've got so much information on what we should be doing as Intersector Working Group Household Survey. And also we have 11 international agencies, right? So these are the messages that we are going to bring back to our members. And then we are really, what's it called, committed to work together. It's not always easy, but I think this is a really great start. And then the message came from you and how we should work together, that really help us to report back to our group. Now, we have 3 minutes left before we should wrap up. I don't know what to do. Kieran, what do you think we should do?
Well,
Go ahead.
I haven't seen any questions in the chat. I mean, if there was one burning question that anyone who's been listening has, I guess we could take it, or else we could wrap up briefly.
Anyone would like to raise your hand? They are muted, muted, so they can't really speak unless you raise your hand. Oh, works now. Oh. Hey, Sichi, did you just do something magic?
Yeah, I just opened everything,
yes.
Open the mics and the camera. So if the floor has any questions, please unmute yourself and raise the question. We have 1 minute left.
So maybe given that we have 1 minute, I wonder, should we attempt to do something that sounds like a wrap up?
Okay, so
should I, Howie?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay, well, look, I want to start by thanking everyone who's participated. I think it's been fascinating, and everyone who has supported us throughout this process. And I go back to probably one of the earlier feelings I had that as I was listening through, was that you'd be forgiven at some point for wondering if we were all talking about the same topic or the same thing, because so many different emphases, so many different challenges are coming up, and I suppose it's getting ever clearer, I think, that coordination in a general sense is too big a topic to talk about as one thing. It's just so many different elements are involved in that. It's good that we've done this work. It's good that we can raise awareness that it is such a multifaceted thing. But I think where we need to go in the future is biting off pieces of it that we can concretely address. And I just took note of various themes. I mean, I took note of the issue of population and sampling frames, right? That's somehow a key issue. I took strong note of this issue about interoperability, right? So different sources, different points in time, different surveys. How do we make best joint use of them? How do we design so that we can achieve that? I took note of the issue of adaptability to scale, context, and frame, right? So how do we do that? Of course, that's a very difficult thing to target as well. But I believe that if we emphasize good practices on making things interoperable, and we do our best to share practices on measurement, on questionnaire content, and so on across countries, we can somehow make that process a little bit easier, at least, even if we can't have a full solution that says, you know, here's a menu, select from this menu and now put it into your country and everything is going to go smoothly. It's not, that's an unrealistic objective. But I think the more sharing we do of practices and the more we focus in on areas where maybe we can do some dedicated, targeted work, then we can do something that's useful. And with that said, I mean, I do hope this has been useful to people. It has been an incredibly interesting process. Personally, I think Howie would feel the same, because we've just ended up touching on so many things that come under a heading of coordination. So we have a lot more to think about. I think if this has served the purpose of raising awareness of what's the range of things involved in coordination are, I think that's already a good step. And I hope we really have achieved that. But also for ourselves, yeah, we have a lot of messages to take away and try to take further. So thank you all for joining. I guess we're closing as we're a few minutes over. Again, I think it's been very, very interesting. Thank everyone for their participation and their contributions. And I look forward to working out how we're going to continue.
It's been really a great journey. It's not an easy one, but I think we've learned so much from you. Please, everyone in the audience, read the reports. There's so much details there. So much.
What to do.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.